If you do a quick Google search, you can see that Steve Nash's 2006 NBA MVP is one of the more controversial ones the sport has had. Many people would look at other players who were voted under Nash as the rightful winners of this award. A popular one was Kobe Bryant, whose ridiculous point total carried a Lakers team into the playoffs that really had no business being there. And LeBron James had a similar display as well at the age of only 21 years old. Was LeBron or Kobe more deserving of this award than Steve Nash? We'll talk about it. We should also talk about Dirk and his 60-win Dallas Mavericks, right in the prime years of his career where he was an unstoppable offensive force. I also think Dwayne Wade is deserving of some credit when you look at his season totals. And there was one other guy, Chauncey Billups. I love Chauncey, but I do think he's a level below the rest of the guys here. But let's talk about Steve Nash first. In this 2006 season, this was right in the heart of the 7 seconds or less Mike D'Antoni era, and Nash's totals for the season were 18 points, 10.5 assists, and he shot 50-40-90, as in 50% from the field, 40% from three, as well as 90% from the free throw line. He carried Phoenix offense, and he was one of the best in the league to do it. And when we look at the team around him, there was Sean Marion, who is one of the more versatile small forwards we've ever seen. Raja Bell, known for his three-point shooting and his defense. Leandro Barbosa, who was a hell of a scorer off the bench for them. But what may have been most impressive is that he did all this without Amari Stoudemire. He only played 3 games due to an injury to his lower body. And these two had developed one of the best pick-and-roll tandems in the league. So for Steve Nash to have a hell of a season with Amari still gone, I do think people kind of forget about that one when they're talking about how he did not deserve it and someone like a Kobe actually did. Now, I understand that Kobe's totals this season were pretty insane. 35 points a game, which is the 8th highest total ever. There was also 27 times this season where he scored at least 40 points, if my math is correct. Of course, there was the historic 81-point game against the Toronto Raptors. And he did all this while still maintaining his rebounds, his assists, and being efficient from the floor. If we look at his teammates, that's when it gets really ridiculous. First off, there's Smush Parker as his point guard, who's known more for Kobe Bryant disliking him than anything that he actually did as an NBA player. And if we look at his center, there was Kwame Brown. Now, I gotta give Kwame a little bit of credit. He managed to be in the NBA for almost a decade. Even then, he was still significantly underqualified to be the starting center of an NBA team. So Kobe's frustrations with him are justified. There was also Chris Mim. I mean, it's Chris Mim. What more do you want? I would say the only legit NBA player on the roster besides Kobe was probably Lamar Odom. And I think when you look at Kobe's performance combined with the lack of an actual team around him, I think this is when people say that he deserved this MVP in 2006, and I do think it's a valid argument. But once again, I do think the fact that Nash did not have Amari Stoudemire with him is kind of left under the rug in this discussion. But I would say that LeBron James also has a stake in this one as well, because in only his 3rd season, he was already being considered one of the best players in the league, given his 31 points, 7 rebounds, 6.5 assists a game, as he carried the Cleveland Cavaliers to 50 wins. What would be considered a career season for most was just a stepping stone in the storied history of where LeBron James is at this point. And his teammates, I wouldn't exactly marvel at them either. For one, there was Eric Snow as his point guard, who was long gone from his years of averaging 6 or 7 assists a game for the Philadelphia 76ers. Also here, he's getting yelled at by Mike Brown. You have to mess up pretty bad for Mike Brown to actually yell at you. There was one of LeBron's favorite teammates, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, a center who was known for his mid-range jumper as well as just overall touch. Then after that, I don't know how great the talent really was. There was Drew Gooden, who was a serviceable NBA power forward, I guess. We have to mention the hair patch on the back of his head because it's just a necessity. And then there was Larry Hughes, who everyone hoped could be LeBron's number 2 guy, and it just never really worked out. So with all this talent around him, for James to still lead these guys to 50 wins, yeah, I can understand why some may believe that James deserved that 06 MVP. But we can also talk about Dirk, who I feel isn't as recognized in this discussion. I remember around this time, people would say that the way to defend Dirk would be to just hope that he misses, because his height, shooting ability, combined with his turnaround jumper, it was almost a guaranteed 2 points if he got you on the low block. 26.5 points a game, 9 rebounds, 40% from 3, while also nearly shooting 50% from the field. I guess if there was anything that could knock Dirk's case back, is I think he had the best supporting cast here. For one, he had Jason Terry still in his prime, averaging around 17 points a game, being one of the best shooters in the NBA, and then Josh Howard, who is one of the more underrated players of the 2000s. His career was cut short because of an injury, but 16 points, while also being very efficient from the field, an athletic player who could also defend multiple positions. Perhaps the other guys around Dirk would knock him down here, but he would also get his MVP just a season later, so he'll be okay. Now, Dwayne Wade actually finished behind Chauncey Billups in the MVP voting for this one, and looking back at just the numbers right now, it actually kind of puzzles me a little bit. I do understand that he had Shaquille O'Neal, who was probably the best other teammate among all these teams, but 27 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds for D-Wade, it's pretty damn legit, man. So ultimately, do I think Steve Nash was deserving of this award? I think his season is a little underrated given that Amari wasn't there, but if I still had to make a selection, I'd probably go with Kobe Bryant. The performance he had, combined with just the teammates around him, it was pretty insane. So Kobe would be my choice, but I do think you could make a valid argument for any of these guys.